At a roadside diner in the middle of the United States, Emily, a young waitress with a heart bigger than her savings, decides to pay for the lunch of a dusty, worn-out, tired-looking young man, clearly penniless. To her, it was just another act of holding down a regular shift. But what Emily didn't know was that this unassuming man was actually Daniel Blackstone, the most reclusive and enigmatic billionaire in town. The simple gesture changes the fate of both, revealing secrets, testing values, and proving that sometimes the greatest treasures lie in the most humble acts. Emily Parker's life was stitched together with long shifts, tight budgets, and the smell of fried onions. Every morning, she pulled her strawberry blonde hair into a ponytail, tied on her apron at Betty's Diner off Route 87, and served smiles with coffee refills. She was 27, with eyes that held stories and hands that knew exhaustion. Her days blurred together, regulars at the counter, truckers passing through, and tips barely enough to keep the lights on in her tiny apartment. On an ordinary Wednesday, the kind where the sun clung lazily to the edge of the sky, Emily was wiping down tables after a slow breakfast rush when the door creaked open. In walked a man, tall, maybe early 30s, covered in road dust. His boots were worn, his jeans faded, and his flannel shirt clung to him like it hadn't been washed in days. He looked out of place, yet somehow, he didn't care. He chose a booth in the back, the one near the jukebox that hadn't worked since the 90s. Emily approached, pen and pad in hand. "Morning. What can I get you?" He hesitated, glancing at the menu like he was reading another language. Then, in a quiet voice, he asked, "How much is the cheeseburger?" She squinted, curious. "With fries. $7.99. He gave a nod, eyes on the cracked leather seat across from him. Emily sensed it, the way he avoided her gaze, the way his shoulders sank. She'd seen this before. The shame of someone who didn't have enough. "You want something to drink?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Water's fine." She brought him the burger anyway, double cheese, extra fries. When he reached into his pocket and pulled out nothing but lint, his face turned crimson. I'll work it off," he muttered, already standing. Emily raised a hand. "Hey, it's taken care of." He blinked. "What?" "It's on me," she smiled. "Everyone deserves a good meal once in a while." He looked at her like she had handed him a winning lottery ticket. "Why would you?" She shrugged. "Why not?" He nodded slowly, his voice rough. "Thank you. Really." Then he left. She didn't even get his name. Later that night, Emily sat on the hood of her car in the parking lot, sipping a lukewarm soda. The stars blinked above the quiet highway, and she thought about that stranger, his eyes, the way he carried himself. There was something off. Not just poor, but hidden. Like he was pretending. The next morning, the diner was buzzing. Not with customers, but with gossip. "You hear about the Blackstone guy?" said Marge, the cook. Emily blinked. "Who?" "Daniel Blackstone. The billionaire. Owns half the town. Real private. Apparently, he disappeared 2 weeks ago. Rumor is, he's been wandering around in disguise. Said he wanted to feel real life again. Whatever that means." Emily's heart skipped. She remembered the man's eyes. Familiar now. That couldn't be him. Could it? As the days passed, Emily thought less about the man and more about the mounting bills in her mailbox. Life moved on, as it always did, until exactly 1 week later. A sleek black car rolled into the diner's lot. A man stepped out, clean-shaven now, in a tailored suit, but his eyes, those same intense, weary eyes, met hers as he entered. Emily froze, tray in hand. "Hey," he said, stopping in front of her. "I think I still owe you $8. The diner went silent. Marge peeked out from the kitchen. Emily blinked. "You're..." He gave a sheepish smile. "Daniel Blackstone." She nearly dropped the tray. Emily stood frozen, staring at the man she had once thought was just another drifter. Now, standing in front of her in a custom-fitted suit and polished shoes, was Daniel Blackstone, the notoriously private billionaire who rarely made public appearances. His reclusive lifestyle had become local legend in their small town of Silver Creek, nestled between the red clay hills of Arizona and the endless stretch of Route 87. Daniel slid into the same booth from a week ago, now looking painfully out of place. The seat squeaked under his weight as he leaned forward, resting his forearms on the chipped table. "I came back to say thank you," he said, voice softer than his image suggested. Emily blinked, her world trying to catch up. "I didn't do anything special." He raised an eyebrow. "You fed a man who clearly couldn't pay. You didn't judge. You didn't ask questions. That's rare." Behind the counter, Marge stared with an open mouth, coffee pot frozen mid-pour. A few customers had already pulled out their phones. Daniel ignored the attention. "I needed a break from the noise," he said. "The suits. The expectations. So I disappeared. No security, no assistance. Just me." "And you ended up in my diner," Emily said, her voice finding its footing. "I ended up exactly where I needed to be." Emily wasn't used to compliments that sounded like confessions. She sat across from him, arms folded. "So what now?" He smiled. "Now, I'd like to get to know the woman who didn't care who I was." Silver Creek had always been quiet. A town where everybody knew everybody, and secrets rarely stayed buried. The gossip mill turned faster than the town's windmill, and Daniel Blackstone's return, paired with the revelation that he'd been fed by a waitress, quickly became the talk of the town. But Daniel didn't care. Over the following days, he showed up again and again. Sometimes just for coffee. Sometimes just to talk. He listened more than he spoke, which surprised Emily. Most rich people, she imagined, liked hearing the sound of their own voice. But not Daniel. He asked about her favorite books, her dream vacation, her thoughts on love, ambition, and grilled cheese sandwiches. Emily told him about her mother, who passed away from cancer when she was 15. About her dream to open her own bakery. About how she kept her father's old truck running with duct tape and faith. About how hard it was being kind in a world that often didn't notice. Daniel never pitied her. He just listened, really listened. He told her about his parents, how they died in a plane crash when he was 18, leaving him a company he barely understood. He'd spent a decade chasing expectations, building empires, climbing a mountain he wasn't sure he even wanted to reach. "Money," he said one night, sipping a milkshake, "buys you everything but meaning." Emily chuckled. "You find meaning in a cheeseburger?" "No," he said. "I found it in the person who gave it to me." The more they talked, the more the lines between worlds began to blur. Emily didn't see a billionaire. She saw a man with quiet pain and rare honesty. And Daniel didn't see a waitress. He saw resilience wrapped in kindness. The town, of course, buzzed. Rumors flew. Some were cruel, others curious. But Emily had never cared much for small talk or big opinions. Still, part of her remained guarded. People like Daniel didn't stay. They passed through. Just like the truckers and tourists she served daily. But Daniel did stay. Every day, for 2 weeks. Until one morning, he didn't come. The booth in the corner sat empty. Emily noticed it the second she walked in, apron half-tied, still yawning. The space where Daniel usually sat looked colder somehow, like it had been holding its breath all night. The jukebox beside it flickered to life briefly, then went dark again, as if it too missed him. She brushed it off at first. Maybe he was busy. Maybe something had come up. After all, billionaires probably didn't live by diner schedules. But then a day passed. Then 2. No call. No message. Just silence. On the 3rd day, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. A man in a dark gray suit stepped out. Slick hair. Mirror-polished shoes. Definitely not a regular. He walked in, eyes scanning the room like it was beneath him, then approached the counter. "You, Emily Parker?" She wiped her hands on a dish towel, wary. "Yeah." He handed her a cream-colored envelope. Mr. Blackstone asked me to deliver this personally. Then he left without another word. She stared at the envelope. Her name was written in perfect, expensive handwriting. She opened it slowly, half afraid of what she'd find. Inside was a handwritten letter. Emily, I wish I could explain this in person, but I had to leave, not by choice, but by duty. The past 2 weeks were the first time in years I felt like a human being and not a headline. You gave me that without expecting anything in return. That's rare. That's real. But there are things happening behind the curtain of my life. A business merger. Family matters. Legal complications. And someone is threatening to use our connection to damage you, to paint you as a gold digger, to humiliate you in the press. I couldn't let that happen. So I disappeared again. I don't know when I'll be able to come back. But I needed you to know, what we shared was real. It mattered. You mattered. Always. Daniel. Emily's hands trembled as she folded the letter. The feeling wasn't anger. It was something more painful. Emptiness, maybe. Or betrayal dressed in heartbreak. For days she walked through her shifts like a ghost. She responded to customers, took orders, poured coffee, but she wasn't really there. She'd been left behind, again, and this time it stung more than she expected. Marge noticed. You okay, sweetheart? The older woman asked, flipping a pancake with motherly suspicion. Emily just shook her head. He left. The billionaire? Yeah, said it was to protect me. Like I'm some damsel in distress. Marge paused. And you wanted him to stay? Emily hesitated. Then, I didn't want him to lie. The real blow came 3 days later. Emily walked into the diner, same routine, but something was off. A customer near the window was reading a newspaper, and on the front page, big, bold, and unavoidable, was a headline that punched her in the gut. Waitress at the heart of Blackstone scandal. Secret romance or PR stunt? The article didn't name her, but it didn't have to. They described the diner, quoted unnamed sources, and speculated that the entire thing was a setup, that Daniel had staged the whole affair to boost his public image during a controversial acquisition. Emily's knees buckled. Marge caught her arm. Ignore it, Em. They don't know anything. But she did. She knew what had happened between them. It wasn't fake. It wasn't for cameras. Still, that didn't matter now. Daniel was gone. And all that was left behind was whispers and pitying stares. That night, Emily sat on the roof of her apartment building, looking out over the dark horizon of Silver Creek. The town felt smaller than ever. She pulled out the envelope again. She read the letter twice, then tore it in half. Then in half again. Until it was nothing but confetti in her lap. No more fairy tales, she whispered. She stood, brushed herself off, and went back inside, not broken, just changed. A week passed. Then 2. Emily adjusted. Or at least, she pretended to. Life at the diner went back to normal on the surface, but beneath the routine, things had changed. She didn't smile as quickly. She didn't stay to chat with the regulars. And that booth in the back? It stayed empty, like a shrine to something unfinished. But she didn't stop moving. Instead of dwelling, Emily threw herself into something new. One night, after closing, she stayed behind at the diner, sketching out floor plans on napkins, crunching numbers on a borrowed laptop. The dream that had once felt like fantasy, her own bakery, started to take shape, one scribbled menu idea at a time. She named it Sweet Grace, after her mother. It wasn't just therapy. It was purpose. And it helped drown out the noise, until the gossip found a new target. Subplot: the return of Morgan Blake. Morgan Blake had grown up in Silver Creek. High school queen bee. Daughter of a councilman. And now, the host of a rising lifestyle vlog with millions of followers, and a documented obsession with the lives of the wealthy. The moment she caught wind of the Daniel Blackstone diner romance, she returned to town with a camera crew and an agenda. I think the public deserves to know the real story, she said with a sweet venom that made Emily want to vomit. Morgan started filming around town, outside the diner, at the grocery store, even across from Emily's apartment. She baited locals into interviews and posted thinly veiled jabs about small-town waitresses with big dreams and bigger secrets. The worst part. People watched. Emily tried to ignore it, until Morgan walked into the diner one evening with her crew and sat in Daniel's booth. "You don't have permission to film here," Emily said, keeping her voice calm. Morgan smiled without looking up. "It's a public space." "No, it's a private business." Marge emerged from the kitchen like a storm. "And I'm about to make it a hostile one." Morgan raised her hands. "Fine. But just remember, Emily, if you really want to play in the big leagues, you better be ready for the spotlight." She left a crisp $20 bill on the table, with a business card on top. Emily didn't touch it. Subplot: the unexpected ally. Days later, as the tension reached its peak, someone unexpected walked into the diner. He was older, maybe mid-60s, with silver hair, a cane, and a presence that made the entire place fall silent. He ordered coffee and sat quietly until Emily brought it over. "You don't know me," he said. "But I know you." She hesitated. "Sorry. My name's Richard Cole. I'm Daniel's godfather, and the chairman of Blackstone Industries." Emily's chest tightened. "I saw what Morgan's been doing. I saw the headlines. I also saw the surveillance footage, the real footage. Daniel wasn't acting. He wasn't scheming. He was lost." She didn't say anything. "I tried to stop him from leaving town, but the media pressure got out of control. He thought disappearing again would protect you." Emily frowned. "And you're telling me this because..." "Because I want to help you open that bakery." Emily blinked. "What?" "Call it a quiet investment. No press. No strings. Just one condition: when Daniel comes back, and he will, you decide what to do. Not the cameras. Not the papers. You." By the end of the week, the bakery had a location. A worn-down storefront 2 blocks from the diner. Emily spent her evenings painting the walls, fixing light fixtures, and building shelves from scratch. Neighbors pitched in. Marge brought sandwiches. Even the mailman offered to help set up chairs. The story was shifting. Not about Daniel. Not anymore. Now it was about her. The grand opening of Sweet Grace came faster than Emily expected. The front windows sparkled with handwritten signs and fresh flowers. The scent of cinnamon rolls and warm brioche filled the air. People lined up before the doors even opened. Local reporters came with notepads, and townspeople snapped photos for their social feeds. No Morgan Blake. No drama. Just her. Just her dream finally real. She stood behind the counter, hands dusted with flour, heart pounding like a drum. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something close to peace. That peace lasted exactly 37 minutes. The bell above the bakery door rang. She turned. And there he was. Daniel Blackstone, in the flesh. No security. No suit. No cameras. Just him, older in the eyes, slightly thinner, but still him. He wore a gray Henley shirt, jeans, and boots. A canvas bag hung over his shoulder. His eyes scanned the room, then locked onto hers. They didn't move. The room fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't for her. Emily froze, hands gripping the counter edge. Her chest rose and fell in sharp, quiet breaths. People whispered, phones buzzed, and someone at the back murmured, "Is that really him?" Daniel walked slowly to the front, his steps measured like a man walking a tightrope. "I heard you make the best coffee cake in Arizona," he said, voice quiet. Emily didn't blink. "You've got some nerve walking in here." "I know. You left me. Again." "I did." She stepped out from behind the counter, eyes never leaving his. "Do you know what they said about me? What I went through?" "I know," he said again. "I saw it all. I didn't plan to. I thought disappearing would be clean. But then I saw the headlines, the videos. I saw Morgan's garbage. And I realized I made the biggest mistake of my life. People in the room were pretending not to listen. But they were. Daniel took a step closer. I didn't come back for headlines. I didn't come back for redemption. I came back for you. Emily shook her head, voice brittle. I built this without you. I survived it. I finally found myself again. I know, he said softly. And it's why I'm not here to ask for a second chance. I'm just here to say, I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped regretting leaving. He reached into his canvas bag and pulled out something, a wrinkled napkin. The same one she had once written her bakery sketch on, during one of their late-night talks at the diner. I kept this, he said. The night you gave me that meal, you didn't know who I was. And that's why it meant everything. Because no one's kind to me unless they think I can give them something. His voice caught. But you were just kind. Emily's jaw clenched. Tears threatened, but she stood tall. I don't need saving, she said. I know. I don't need you to fix anything. I wouldn't dream of it. A long silence filled the space between them. Then, quietly, she asked, Why now? Because for the first time in my life, he said, I realized I want something that doesn't come with power or contracts or control. I want something real. Even if I can't have it. Emily looked at him. Really looked at him. And she saw it, the cracks behind the charm. The regret behind the confidence. The hope behind the humility. She took the napkin from his hand. Her fingers brushed his. You didn't ruin me, she said. You helped me become who I was supposed to be. But that doesn't mean I forget. I wouldn't expect you to. She paused. There's a seat by the window. If you want coffee. Daniel's eyes widened. Just a little. You're not forgiving me? No. But you're not kicking me out either? She gave the smallest smile. That's a start. Daniel stayed. He sat at the window table with a slice of coffee cake and a black coffee. No sugar, no cream. Emily didn't sit with him, not yet. She served the rest of her customers like nothing had changed, but everyone noticed how her eyes drifted toward him more often than they should have. He didn't push. He didn't ask for time or forgiveness. He just existed in her space, quietly, respectfully, and with a sense of gratitude that didn't need to be spoken. By noon, the crowd thinned. Marge showed up with flowers and a tight-lipped smile. You know, she said to Emily while unpacking a tray of muffins, when a man sits quietly for 4 hours drinking bad coffee and not moving a muscle, he's either a stalker or really sorry. Emily sighed. He's sorry. Marge gave a grunt. Good. Let him be. Emily nodded. That was the plan, at least for now. Later that day, Emily locked the front door and started wiping down the counters. The soft hum of the overhead lights and the clatter of dishes were familiar sounds, grounding ones. Daniel hadn't moved. She turned to him. Why are you still here? He stood slowly, brushing crumbs from his lap. I didn't want to leave until I knew where we stood. We don't stand anywhere, she said. Not yet. He nodded, eyes downcast. She continued, gentler now, but that doesn't mean we can't figure it out. A pause. Why didn't you fight harder, Daniel? She asked, not with anger, but sadness. I thought stepping away was noble, he said. But I've learned something since then. Love doesn't ask for perfection. It just asks for presence. And I failed you. Emily looked away, her jaw tense. I'm not here to win, he added. I'm just here. That stayed with her. Across town, Morgan Blake posted a video, an emotional monologue about how misunderstood she'd been, how the media twisted her words, and how she wished Emily the best. No one believed it. The public's attention had shifted. Emily wasn't a scandal anymore. She was a survivor, a woman who'd built something on her own, despite the headlines, despite the assumptions. The narrative had changed. not because she fought to correct it, but because she lived beyond it. That night, Daniel walked Emily home. They didn't hold hands. They didn't say much. But the silence wasn't strained, it was familiar. At her door, she turned to him. "Tomorrow, I open again. At 7. I'll be there," he said. "As a customer." He smiled. "Of course." She hesitated, then added, "Maybe one day, as something more." His eyes softened, and for the first time since he'd come back, he looked at peace. "I can wait," he said. She closed the door gently behind her. Weeks passed. The autumn air rolled into Silver Creek, crisp and golden. Leaves fluttered down like confetti on the sidewalks. Emily's bakery was thriving, with customers spilling in and out from morning to dusk. Locals came not just for the pastries, but for the warmth, the environment she had created with her own hands. Daniel remained in the background. Every morning, he arrived just after 7, always ordering the same, coffee cake and black coffee. He sat by the window, laptop open, occasionally answering emails, occasionally just watching the street. They didn't talk much at first. Just glances. Nods. The occasional small smile passed across the counter. But the distance between them slowly, steadily shortened. One morning, as Emily carried out a tray of fresh croissants, Daniel stood and walked to her side. "Need help with that?" he asked. She looked up at him, amused. "Since when do billionaires do bakery runs?" "Since they stopped pretending to be above it," he said. She paused, then handed him a tray. And just like that, he became part of her world, not in grand gestures, not in declarations, but in small, simple actions. Helping stock shelves. Fixing the jammed receipt printer. Changing a light bulb she couldn't reach. He never tried to take over. He just helped. Growth for Emily. She learned to delegate, to rest, to breathe. Owning her own place had been a dream, but it came with burdens, bills, staff schedules, equipment failures. The pressure had nearly crushed her at times. But with Daniel quietly nearby, offering support without smothering her, she started to see that she didn't have to carry it all alone. She also started teaching baking classes on weekends, something her mother had always wanted to do. It became her favorite part of the week. Sharing recipes. Watching others light up over their own creations. Creating something bigger than just a business. A community. For the first time, she began to believe in longevity. In staying. In building roots. Growth for Daniel. Daniel changed too. He sold one of his companies. A massive tech firm based in Chicago. Not because he needed the money, but because he didn't want to chase relevance anymore. He realized that the hunger that had once driven him was no longer ambition, but fear. Fear of being seen as weak if he stopped moving. He began investing quietly in community projects. A new library wing, scholarships for local students, renovations for the town park. All done anonymously. Except Emily knew. And she never said a word. One Friday night, the town held a harvest festival downtown. String lights twinkled over food stalls and hayrides. Music floated through the cool night air. Emily and Daniel walked together through the crowd. Not holding hands, but walking close. Their shoulders brushed every few steps. A young girl ran up to Emily, holding a cupcake. "I made it like you taught us," she said proudly. Emily knelt to admire it. "That's perfect," she said. "You're a natural." Daniel watched her, eyes filled with something quiet and powerful. Admiration. Respect. Love. As the girl ran off, Emily turned and caught him looking. "What?" she asked, smiling. He shook his head. "Nothing. I get it now." "Get what?" "What it means to live a life that matters." Later that night, as they sat on a bench under the stars, Daniel finally spoke the words he'd been holding for months. "I still love you, Emily." She didn't respond right away. Her hands were folded in her lap, her eyes on the stars. Then softly she said, "I know." He exhaled. But I love myself now too, she added. I didn't before. He turned to face her, unsure where she was going with it. And because of that, she continued, I'm not afraid of what this could be. Not anymore. He reached for her hand. This time, she let him take it. Late November arrived in Silver Creek, carrying with it a hush that made even the loudest hearts pause. Emily's bakery had become a landmark. Tourists who'd once come for the desert landscapes now came for her maple scones and warm cinnamon brioche. Locals who once whispered about the billionaire and the waitress now nodded to Daniel like he'd always belonged there. Because, in a strange way, he did. But peace rarely lasts uninterrupted. The first sign of trouble came not from whispers or reporters, but from Daniel himself. One evening, just after closing, he stayed behind at the bakery. Emily was wiping down the front windows, the last traces of daylight sinking below the hills. Daniel sat on a stool by the counter, unusually quiet. She glanced at him. You're brooding. That's not allowed here. He looked up, eyes heavy. There's something you should know. She stopped wiping. Okay. I'm being pulled back. Emily's heart stuttered. What do you mean? The board of directors at Blackstone Industries. They're trying to oust me. Said my absence is affecting shareholder confidence. They're calling an emergency vote. Her shoulders tensed. You haven't been gone that long. It's not just about time, he said. It's about optics. They think I've lost my edge. That I've gone soft. Emily folded her arms. Because you stopped drowning in your own ambition? Daniel gave a small, joyless smile. Something like that. She didn't say anything for a long moment. What happens if they win? She finally asked. I lose controlling interest. They strip me of my voting rights. I become a figurehead in name only. And if they don't, I stay in charge. But it means leaving here for a while. Reclaiming control. Fighting. Her heart sank. You're choosing between me and them. No, he said gently. I'm choosing between who I was and who I want to be. She didn't know what hurt more, that he had to go, or that she understood why he might. Over the next few days, the tension thickened. Daniel became quieter, more distant. Not emotionally, but practically. Endless phone calls, legal documents, strategy meetings. Emily watched him slip, piece by piece, back into the suit, the image, the machine. But she also saw the difference. This time, he wasn't doing it to prove anything. He wasn't running from himself. He was fighting for something. And that changed everything. Meanwhile, Emily faced a decision of her own. Her bakery was offered a feature in a national food magazine. A full spread. Interviews. A chance to grow her brand beyond Silver Creek. But it came with expectations. Interviews about her past with Daniel. Questions about his return, their relationship, their story. The editor said it sweetly, your love life sells as well as your cinnamon rolls. Emily sat in the back room with the draft article on her lap, hands shaking. She thought about who she had been a year ago. Invisible. Overlooked. Dependent on tips and half-hope. She thought about the woman she'd become, strong, self-sustaining, known. And she realized something powerful. She didn't need the world's spotlight to shine. She had found her light. She picked up the phone and told the editor, no story, no interviews. Just a bakery. That was enough. The night before Daniel's board meeting, he returned to the bakery after hours. Emily was behind the counter, boxing leftover pastries for the food bank. He stood in the doorway, silent for a long moment, then walked to her side. This might be goodbye, he said, not trying to soften it. I know, she replied. I might be gone for a while. She closed the box. I'll be here. Or I won't. But I'll be okay. Daniel looked at her then, really looked. You've changed, he said, wonder in his voice. Emily nodded. I had to. He leaned in. Gently. I hope I have too. You have, she whispered. And in the quiet that followed, he kissed her, softly, reverently, like someone who knew it might be the last time. Then he left. Daniel stood in the towering glass conference room of Blackstone Industries, high above the skyline of Manhattan. Snow drifted beyond the windows like silent witnesses to the war about to unfold. He faced a boardroom full of executives, most of them older, sharper, colder. Men and women who had once celebrated his rise, now sharpening knives for his fall. At the head of the table sat Richard Halvorson, interim CEO and longtime rival. His smile was all teeth. Let's begin, shall we? Daniel didn't blink. He'd come prepared. The meeting dragged on for hours. Charts, financial reports, projections, accusations. They called him distracted, detached, too involved in a personal matter to lead the empire he'd built. Daniel listened, took every blow. He let them exhaust themselves. Then he stood. No slides, no speeches, just truth. I built this company in a basement apartment, he said calmly, with borrowed code and 3 maxed-out credit cards. None of you were there when it was just me and a vision. The room was still. You think I've gone soft because I left for a few months? He stepped closer. I didn't step away to run. I stepped away to learn. I found clarity, and I found balance. For the first time in years, I remembered why I started this. He paused, letting it land. Leadership isn't about how many hours you work. It's about knowing what matters. And right now, this company needs someone who understands both technology and people. Someone who's willing to build, not just preserve. Silence. Then Halvorson smirked. Beautiful speech. But let's vote. The vote began. One by one, hands rose. Some in favor of keeping him. Some not. It came down to the final shareholder, a quiet, older woman at the far end of the table. She rarely spoke. No one expected her to tip the scale. She looked at Daniel. I've read the papers, she said slowly. I've seen the headlines. Daniel waited. But I also visited a small town in Arizona recently. My grandson lives there. He told me about a bakery that changed the entire mood of the town. Said the woman who owns it changed lives, including his. Daniel blinked. His heart skipped. He said a man helped her once, and that the man didn't ask for anything in return. Her eyes softened. I'm voting to keep you in charge. Hands were counted. Daniel won, by a single vote. Back in Silver Creek, Emily was unaware of the result. She was in the middle of a class, teaching a dozen children how to knead dough. Laughter filled the kitchen as flour floated through the air. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside for air. The wind was cold. The streets were quiet. Her heart felt heavier than usual, and she didn't know why. Then she turned the corner and stopped. Daniel stood there. In his coat, snow dusting his shoulders, a look of quiet awe in his eyes. I thought you were, she started. I was, he said. You won. He nodded. By 1 vote. She stepped closer. And you came back. I didn't win just to leave again, he said. I came back because there's nothing in that empire I built that compares to this. To you. She stared at him. You're serious. I came back to offer you a deal. Emily frowned. A deal. He smiled. You keep making the best pastries in the state, and I'll keep showing up every morning for coffee. Maybe help out once in a while. Quietly. And what do I get in return? She asked, arms crossed. You get me, he said. The real me. Not the headlines. Not the fortune. Just the man who never forgot that one day, in a small cafe, a woman paid for his sandwich with kindness. A pause. Then she said it. You're late. He blinked. Late. My morning rush ended an hour ago, she said, grinning. He stepped closer, gently brushing the flour off her cheek. I'll be early tomorrow. She nodded, and this time, when he kissed her, she kissed him back with the certainty of someone who had waited long enough, and finally found her answer. Months later, winter thawed into spring, and Silver Creek bloomed with it. The bakery, Sweet Grace, became more than a small-town success. It became a symbol of growth, of second chances, of quiet resilience. Locals and travelers alike filled the small shop daily, not just for the pastries, but for the feeling. Emily stood behind the counter one morning, watching the line form at the door before she'd even flipped the sign to open. She smiled, tying her apron, her heart steady and full. Daniel came in 5 minutes later, as he always did, punctual now, without fail. He carried the morning paper under one arm and 2 coffees in hand. "You're early," she said, raising an eyebrow. He placed the cups down. "You said being late was a problem." "I also said I don't take orders," she teased. He leaned across the counter and kissed her forehead. "I wouldn't dream of giving them." Their rhythm was different now. Balanced. No grand declarations or high drama. Just the steady, dependable kind of love that grows when the spotlight fades and real life begins. Daniel still managed his company. From a distance. He flew out when necessary, but he always came back. He bought a modest house a few blocks from the bakery and spent his days working remotely, blending into a life that once seemed impossible for him. Sometimes people still recognized him. Sometimes the past still reached for them through headlines or whispers. But Emily had learned something vital. The truth didn't need defending when it lived out loud. She built her life the way she baked, carefully, with intention, and never rushing the process. And he stayed. Not because she needed him, but because she chose him. And he chose her, every single day. A year later, a small plaque appeared on the wall beside the front entrance of Sweet Grace. It read, "In memory of the day one act of kindness changed 2 lives. Paid in full. Not with money, but with heart." Every now and then, people stopped to read it. Some asked about the story. Most didn't. But Emily always smiled when she walked past it. Because every morning, without fail, Daniel still came in. And every morning, she poured his coffee, not because she had to, but because it still mattered. And always would. If this story touched something in you, a memory, a hope, a truth, don't let it end here. Let it remind you that small acts can change everything. That kindness has weight, and so does love built quietly over time. Share this story with someone who believes in second chances, or with someone who's still waiting for theirs. Remind them that even in the most unexpected places, a bakery, a broken morning, a borrowed smile, something extraordinary can begin. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories don't start with fireworks. They start with a sandwich and a thank you.